You gotta
Yeah,
use your
is it?
microphone,
Huh?
David. Your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. Very, very excited to be with you as always. Yes, I did have coffee by the way this morning,
I can see
but
it.
but
You're really
but but
vibing.
but here's the thing.
Yeah.
I just had my 9 pills of special vitamins that I take. So
Well, you know what?
yeah,
In
I've
this
been
day and
taking
age,
them. Yeah, I've been
you kind
taking
of
them for a
gotta.
while. So you can tell, guys, I'm a little bit hyper here, but
Mhm.
but also hyper because of the nature of the topic we're gonna be talking about. Very, very, very interesting. So, how's your week, by the way?
It is. It's gone pretty
Yeah,
good. A
good,
lot of
and it's
lot
going
of big
fast, huh?
stuff. So
Yeah,
fast,
yeah.
so
Oh,
fast.
good, good.
Um,
All right, let's get into our topic because, as I said, it's an interesting topic. This one has to do, of course, there are many out there. Yeah,
mhm.
we could have picked up the topic, for example, what Iran just decided now to
Oh my gosh,
strike in Israel. Yeah, but we all
insanity.
know how things are. We
Yeah,
decided to focus this one on the economic and finance aspects of it because we believe, and again, this is us when we
mhm.
converse about the topics, we believe in what lies ahead regarding the upcoming American administration. In other words, who
Absolutely.
the next president of the United States is going to be.
Well, and specifically their relationship to China, because right
Oh, big
now,
time. Big
absolutely big
time.
time. So one of the things that we know
Yeah.
going forward is, we know what Donald Trump's position on China has been,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we
Mm-hmm.
knew he has a very similar position now that he did when he was president. And so we sort of have that as a known. The thing that's been very interesting here is Kamala Harris having been put forth as the Democratic nominee for president. I think that shocked many people,
Including
including
us.
us. Very, very shocked by
Uh,
that. But it also gave China, and this is something that is a reaction that is happening in China,
yeah.
is that she is very much an unknown. So during her vice presidency and during her political career
Yeah.
as a whole,
Yeah.
she hasn't really been particularly vocal in any direction on China. Whereas Donald Trump and now his vice presidential nominee, JD Vance, have been very, very vocal. And I'll have some videos a little bit later of
Yeah.
JD Vance talking about this because he is very much in the same line
Yeah.
of thinking that Donald Trump is. But Kamala Harris is a very not a wild card, because I don't know that I would call her a wild card, but a lot of people are wondering sort of what a lot of her policies are going to end up being.
Assuming she has policies, right?
Oh no, I
It's a
don't.
it's a laughing.
It's
It's
yeah,
laughable because
yeah,
that's a reflection of really the nature of the leaders we have in this
yeah.
country. But that's beside the point. We're not going to focus on that, guys. We're going to focus on the economic aspect from a global perspective
Mhm.
and thinking in terms, because we're only about shy of what, 4 months for the
I
elections.
know, which is why
Yeah,
it's
that's it.
insanity,
Yeah,
absolute
and that's
insanity.
gonna be determining. For
Mhm.
example, you got the two main aspects of it. It has to do with the U.S. China trade relations.
Yeah,
You can't ignore
absolutely.
that one. Yeah, and you can ignore the impact if things go the wrong direction.
Mhm.
What that's gonna do to us here?
Right.
China is already paving the way for what if.
Right.
I got a sort of, I was talking recently to Digby. I'm sure you guys know, and you watched that one last time. And the idea of how you take the example of countries like Vietnam, like
Yeah.
Cambodia, like
Yeah.
Laos, like Thailand, all of them considering the economic expansions because part of it had to do with the joint ventures
Mhm.
regarding economic projects from China.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so that means to me personally, is China already thinking in terms, yes, we're gonna wait and see, like Europe is doing, like
Yeah.
Russia is doing. Everybody's waiting and see what the election is gonna, who's gonna become the next
Including
president.
us.
Yeah, but for the
Including
Chinese
the
already
US
thinking
people.
in terms of the idea of trade,
Mhm.
because we can't trust the Americans. That will be the thinking in Beijing.
Right.
We can't trust them no matter what they say. We all know this. But also we're seeing, for example, how Europeans are taking initiative by heading out to China. They're not coming to the US.
Right. So let me speak to that for a second,
Yeah.
because I would like to say that in a sense, so don't at me in the comments, guys. Okay. I'm absolutely not anti-China.
Yeah.
Please do not say that in the comments. It is absolutely not true. What I will say is that in terms of threat, which I don't think in those terms. Okay. That's not, those are not my words. That is not the way I think. The way that I think is what are the statistics? What is the actual information? Okay. So the actual information in terms of Chinese economic growth. Okay. So we are going to have an economist that we're doing an interview with tonight that is going to talk about where China is. We're releasing it later. Sorry, guys. My thoughts are all over the place right now. But if you look at trade with other countries, so China is actually the largest trade this is the largest number one trading partner of the EU and Japan, which are two countries that the US historically has more or less had political control over, or has political influence. Like let's call it that.
Or we can use the term dominance over.
Sure. You guys know what it is,
idea.
Okay? And so when you really look at, and China has a much larger population than the United States. I think it's 1.4 billion, if I'm not right.
That's correct.
I'm not wrong. So we're really looking at China being the largest economy outside of the United States, right?
Yeah.
So it's China and the US in terms of economy. So when you're really looking at global dominance, if you're looking at maintaining a hegemony, the United States knows that China is on its way up. Right? China has plenty of its own economic challenges, but if you look at trade alone, it is on its way up. And it has the BRI that it is focusing very heavily on. And this is something that one of our other guests, Leo, actually said that was very interesting to me, that made a lot of sense, because, China is the largest greenhouse gas emitter and accounting for more emissions in 2022 than the United States and Europe combined. So but China has a very large push for EVs. Why is that? Because China wants to decrease its reliance on oil, because that is one of the things that keeps any country basically bound, is how much it is reliant on OPEC plus, basically. The control of the oil flow, right? Because
got it. Don't mess around with this.
So anyway, I do want to say that in terms of either candidate and in terms of economics, the United States isn't just going to let its hegemony fall. It's not just going to let its dollar fall. It's not just going to let its status fall. And so since that's the case, it makes sense that the candidates are coming out kind of swinging against China. But is it China's fault that happened? No, it's the United States' fault. It's short-sighted policy fault on the part of the United States that we are in the economic situation we are in with China. Who sent their manufacturing to China? The United States did that. China didn't steal it from us. We asked them to do that. So it makes a lot of sense that the candidates that are coming out right now are taking that position. I do not agree with that position. Let me be clear.
It's for domestic consumption. That's usually the political side of how things work for us. You have to create an enemy.
Absolutely.
And you have to sort of tailor all the narrative towards that particular enemy. And that's for political consumption domestically here. So because the masses do not know.
But I will say that I think that was either politicians kicking the can down the road, the ones who implemented these policies to begin with, were either kicking the can down the road and saying, okay, well, that's somebody else's problem when China rises, or they did it on purpose, which I'm sure some of them did, or they were short-sighted and stupid and didn't know that this was going to happen.
Well, it's kind of it's a natural progression, the way I look at it. The rise of China was inevitable.
Well,
it was like no brainer. If you are to look at the history for the last 40 years, and you start to realize, okay, how much China is working towards developing its own domestic market, how much China is involved in reinvesting in its own infrastructure, how much China is involved in allocating funds towards. This is how they dealt with the corruption and all that stuff we never dealt with, because the assumption on our part was always,
We're not dealing with it now either.
well, you know where I stand on that,
Yes,
right?
I know.
But that's the reality of it. This is why we got shocked when that time came for China to move forward now in saying, we are here, deal with it.
Right.
What we didn't want to accept is the fact that the short time frame of 35 to 40 years.
Yeah.
That's all. That's only how long it took the US, China to move to the top. Where the challenge also was the speed by which the development in technology, education, infrastructure, you name it, all that stuff. Why? It's because, again, you go back and see how much China reinvested its own money domestically, something we don't do.
You know, I will say, I feel like it's very much the difference between the victim mentality, which right now, all the US politicians are like, we're a victim to XYZ. We're a victim to China. We're a victim to our whatever. So it's a very much a victim mentality here. Whereas what I have seen with China, now granted, like I said, I am very middle of the road with China. I think there's things that really work and there's things that really don't. And that's absolutely fair, I think, in terms of the reality of the situation and the data. It's not a feeling. I don't have a feeling about it. All I have is data, okay? So, but they have not taken the victim road. They've taken okay, this is what our circumstance is, and this is where we would like to be. And so in 40 years, that's how you do that quickly, is you have an intention and you follow that intention.
You have an objective,
Here in the United States, what is our objective?
Well, we don't, because our
Do you see
system,
what I'm saying?
because our system is we go from 4-year to 4-year stuff. So China has the continuation of the leadership, and that leadership you can't.
I will say, I do think that part of the people who are really running things, right? Because now that the world has really sort of understood the state that Joe Biden was in, you know, people have really come to that realization. I think it is probably a very logical next step to say he probably was not running things for a while. And since that was not the case, who was?
Well, as one who worked inside Washington, and I was privy to certain information. Unfortunately, I can't disclose the stuff, but he was never the president of the United States.
Right.
You know, Americans were disillusioned with this reality that when you hear the statement of the leader of the free world. What world? Well, it was never the case.
And you can even look at that by the fact that when presidents come in, and this is not just the United States. I mean, look at Giorgia Meloni when she of Italy when she came in, she had she had very, very different positions coming in than she did when she actually gained that status. And the United States is very similar, right? So a president will come in and here's their platform. This is what they say they're going to do. This is even what they look like they want to do. And then they can't get it done. Why is that? It's not just because of Congress. Why is that?
It's the power that the entities be they behind the scenes are controlling. Speaking of Giorgia Meloni, you know, she's she concluded her trip to China yesterday. She was in Beijing and Shanghai. So and just to tie it to our conversation as to what should we expect U.S. policy towards China, especially from an economic perspective. We're not going to be talking about Taiwan yet. We will. Is the idea that how Meloni realized the big mistake she made when she withdrew under pressure from the U.S. We all know this. It was no secret. We all know it. The fact that it shows how quickly it was to influence her. She couldn't take stand on something because she's not a politician. You know, Meloni is not, what's his name? The guy who died, Berlusconi. The late Berlusconi. Berlusconi was kind of different. Berlusconi was, whether you like him or not, is beside the point. But I'm sure he's turning in his grave now, given what Meloni's policy. But my point in all this, and this is not about criticism, is about highlighting the thinking of a leader when he or she start to realize my country is going the wrong direction. In this case, Italy. So to the Chinese, Chinese could have shut the door on her face and said, no, we're done with you. China won't think of it that way, won't
Yeah.
approach it that way, because you're going to have to think about how the Chinese think,
Mhm.
which is a reflection of their history. Chinese tends to be
Mhm.
very, and I repeat this, very, very patient.
Yeah.
Very patient. They don't react emotionally.
Patience is a virtue.
It
really is.
It is. Look at their history and
Yeah.
you'll get an idea. So to them was the idea that, let's welcome her back.
Right.
Okay, we'll have a talk. And the agreement they signed, the 3-year agreement,
Uh-huh.
that's a way for China to test the waters.
Yeah.
Because usually when you sign an agreement,
Yeah.
remember, China signed an agreement with Qatar
Yeah.
regarding gas. You know for how long?
How long?
27 years.
Yeah.
So
It's a
3
long
years
time.
is nothing.
Yeah.
But to the Chinese, a strategic move.
Absolutely.
Chinese also playing it shrewdly in creating that wedge within Europe, because Europe in itself has been now decimated, economically speaking,
Oh yeah, you're
by us.
Yeah.
So, and since Europe, the EU, trades a lot with this is why she had like top CEOs going with her to China.
Yeah.
Is the fear of, one of the main projects she's pushing for?
Hmm.
EVs.
Yeah.
Is that a coincidence?
Right.
No.
Right.
It's because what she's seeing that Hungary did with China, Serbia did with China, and maybe some other countries are moving into the same direction.
Yeah.
And Europe as a whole, we positioned Europe where we want them to be, because we wanted to sort of crack their economic structure to stay dependent on us.
Well, and Nord Stream really did that.
Yeah, the energy is also, look no further what's going on in the UK now.
Yeah.
You know, the level of poverty in the UK now is going up.
Yep.
Same to even our neighbor to the north, or even for us here in the US. So,
Yeah.
And
this is joke. I was going to say here.
It's getting bad here, guys,
Yeah.
poverty-wise. But this is my point, is to think in terms of how China approaching, and this is just one example regarding Italy. But you look at the big picture, and the big picture is the economic aspect.
Absolutely.
And how the US now, we're wondering who the next president will be, and how he or she will approach dealing with China. Because it is my belief, and this is my own opinion, it's too late. It is too late now for us to be trying to convince the Chinese this direction or that direction.
Yeah, for
Chinese
sure.
have reached a point now where they can say to the Americans, yeah, we'll sit down and have a talk with you. But in the back of their minds, they're going to say, okay, when you're done talking, we'll just shake your hand and say thank you. In other words, they are not going to trust what the Americans are saying.
And for sure, and I, like you said earlier, when we have a president basically that comes in and out every 4 or 8 years, the next administration may not continue with the continuity of what the previous one
reverse all the policies.
Right, reverse all the policies, which is very common. It's not uncommon for that to happen. And even right now, as China and the rest of the world is looking at who's going to be the next president, which administration is coming in next, the question is, what policies are they going to undertake, because they will most likely be different than the ones before them. And so it really is, and every 4 or 8 years the policies fundamentally change. And right now we're having such a values gap between the right and the left extremes that I think it is I think the world is looking at us. I think somebody said this to me the other day, or the world is watching us like they're watching the Tiger King TV show. Did you ever watch Tiger King?
No.
Oh my god,
I heard of it, but
it is insanity. Like that that
true.
TV show is absolute insanity. And for those of you guys who have seen Tiger King, oh man, I don't know that I've ever seen something as insane as Tiger King. I'm just gonna put that out there.
But this is also a reflection of a much bigger picture, and the much bigger picture has to do with the shift of the global system that is moving from a unipolar to multipolar. We're already in a multipolar. Let's just not just from now on, guys. If you ever have a conversation with your friends or whatever, and if someone said, "Well, we're gonna be shifting from a unipolar," no, it's too late. We already shifted. We are in a multipolar system, and the problem we have, especially reflected through the policies. This is how usually where, for example, a government has come to a grip with the reality or not. It's reflected through its policies. And I'll give you guys 2 examples as I move forward here. The idea that for us, we are now willing to accept that oh my gosh, the world has shifted. The world does not need us anymore.
Yeah.
The best example I can give you is the recent developments within BRICS on two fronts. One is financial, and the other one has to do with the membership.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about Malaysia?
Let's talk about this one. And the whole reason for why this is important for us to understand this dynamics of the financial and economic vis-a-vis the policies that the US might embark on comes in November. It's because, again, it's the reflection of we are not willing to accept.
That's the dog snoring. If you guys can hear some snoring.
Maybe she's dreaming. Oh, well, let her be. Let her be.
I think she's dreaming.
She is.
She's dreaming.
Yeah. Well, especially after you cut her nails yesterday. Trimmed it. Not cut them, but trimmed them.
We trimmed 3 nails.
Well, it's better.
If anyone has any advice for how to trim nails of dogs who really don't want their nails trimmed, please put that in the comments.
She got mad.
My husband and I would really appreciate it if you guys had any advice.
I was here yesterday visiting here, and I saw her. I was like, I see Elizabeth say, "See you. I gotta leave." She was the dog.
She just gets really scared.
Some dogs don't
I don't know. She's a rescue, so we don't know what happened to her before.
Probably.
But she needs her nails trimmed. So guys, any advice?
So anyway, to go back to our topic regarding the BRICS, the financial aspects, is that the US is realizing that that train has already left the station. And that one on 2 main fronts. One of them, as I mentioned, the financial aspect, because BRICS is moving forward. And by the way, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, we're going to have an expert on this particular field in the finance. We're going to be recording this and releasing it. I want to keep it a surprise for you guys. So there's the second part has to do with the members. You look at a membership.
Yeah.
You look at now, over 38 countries now, or 40. Right. By I read some reports, some of them saying about 40. But let's just talk about the recent one. Malaysia submitted the papers, meaning that they wanted to become a BRICS members. And that is very, very important given the timing.
Yeah.
So it makes you even wonder, what was Malaysia calculating its move?
Right.
I think so.
Right.
Because if you go back a year and a half ago or so, Malaysia didn't.
Well, Malaysia has a pretty decent sized economy, which I think is a very interesting choice.
And do you know, by the way, the sheer size of their trade with China is almost $100 billion in 2023.
Comparatively, that seems like, it's so small if it's like US or whatever.
Yeah,
but if you take the rest of the world, basically, no matter what, it gives you more market. And I think that that's an interesting take that China has done, is instead of being like, well, we're just going to rely on the big fish, right? Like the US market. Basically, the US market. They have gone after some of these smaller markets because you add a bunch of smaller markets together, and what do they become?
A big one.
A big one.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they did. Their approach. This is where the BRI comes in. And by the way, guys, I'll be having a conversation on Saturday with Dr. Dashan Fang and Dr. Yan Lian. So, and I'll have them here on this channel as well. So be on the lookout for that on Saturday at 12:30. The idea of the BRI role into all this. Of course, we all know the narrative coming out of Washington. Sure. It's a death trap, right? That was the narrative.
Well, yeah. Sure.
I just saw the video we did about 2.5 years ago.
Oh, yeah?
With Hussein Askari.
Oh, yeah. He's great. He's great.
Yeah. It was just the idea of the argument, like if you look at what IMF is doing to other countries versus what the BRI did and still doing, you can reach your own conclusion for that. And again, this is not about advocating for or talking against. Right. No. We provide the facts and let you reach your own conclusion. But the facts remains. The facts remains is that countries that have get involved in BRICS, their infrastructure has improved.
Their infrastructure has improved. And so human beings by nature, we want to belong to something because there's strength in numbers. And so it's very interesting because Malaysia never in a million years could get into like G7, for example. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And they won't want them anyway.
Well, but even if they could, even if they did want it, they couldn't get into it, right? Yeah. And so but they can potentially get into BRICS, right? Yeah. So it is very interesting watching who was more or less kicked out of the cool kids Western world club. And now they're like, well, you know what? We're making our own club because we can, because now we have an economic powerhouse. Because I don't think, if China was not in the position that it's in right now, I do not think people would be jumping and joining, right? It's because of the position that China's in. And quite frankly, for the United States, because it's at the top right now, the only place the US has to go is down. And I think that's its biggest concern, because China really, China just came from being down, right? They're on the upward trajectory. So
sorry, I made a mistake here.
What kind of car is that?
Speaking of that, this is the new Chinese EV SUV. This is the equivalency of a Range Rover.
It looks nice.
He made
nice
big headway in Qatar. You won't believe it.
I can see why.
Now check this out. Check this out. I kept this picture. This is Chinese.
It looks really good.
This is a Chinese U9. I wish I can buy this one. You know how much it costs?
How much?
140,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is the lower scale of it. There is the upper scale of this, and it costs $340,000. The same one, the equivalency of Lamborghini and Ferrari. You know how much the Lamborghini cost?
What?
$2.1 million.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which means you can buy the first one here at 140. You can buy up to 8, and you still have over $100,000.
Yeah.
So, hey, I wish I could.
Well, hey, brand recognition is something for Ferrari.
Yeah, but it tells you right there is the advancements of work. This is why Italy and Meloni had to go. This is why even Scholz had to go, and Macron, the idiot Macron, one over there, and they are concerned. Europeans are concerned. But also this has to do with the shift.
It absolutely does. And, China has about 4 times the population of the United States.
Yeah.
Over the last generation, China has the largest purchasing power in parity terms in the world. And so I actually want to bring up this topic too, because I think this is interesting. So, Apple actually fell out of the top 5 smartphone vendors in China. So Apple was, Apple used to be like the hot thing, right? All over the world. Apple used to be the hot thing in China as well. And so they just fell out of the top 5. Huawei had a big resurgence. They're a lot more popular right now, but Apple fell out of the top 5. And so they had to, they very recently did like a sale on iPhones, and that boosted it a little bit. But I think their losses last quarter were only like 2.5%, something like that, or 3.5%, whereas they were like 10% before on iPhones. It was pretty bad. But China is starting to favor its own brands also. So I will say the United States is in a very challenging situation, because the US needs China as a market also, right? So it's not just one directional. This is bi-directional, because China, the US is not thrilled that Apple has fallen, and Apple is obviously not thrilled that they've fallen out of the top 5 in terms of smartphones. Apparently their iPad sales are up some, and their iPhone, like I said, they did a round of sales. And so like a sale price, not like sales, but like a sale price. They ran discounts. That's a better word for that. So we're running into some very interesting things where the United States, the large corporations in the US are trying to keep American dollars, right? They're trying to keep American shares, which is why we have the EV. Basically, the EV ban. It's not a ban, but it is a ban in terms of how much it costs. It's a ban.
Yeah, what we want about it in a nicer way by saying, tariffs and all that. It's because we did the same. I was aware of when Huawei launched its first phone. Right. I was in Washington, D.C. at the time, and the conversation was, the decision was, because it was a meeting, I recall, the White House at that time hosted the chief executives of the IT companies in the US. And about the creation of infrastructure here in the US. It was about the CEOs complaining to the president at that time, saying, you're going to have to, or Congress for that matter, you're going to have to create a legislation that will ban the sale of Huawei. You know why? Because Huawei phone was at $125. The same equivalency of the phone Apple was promoting for
like a
400
grand.
No, at that time they were $500.
Oh, okay.
No,
okay.
that was
They're way
way
more
back.
expensive now.
Oh, way back. Oh, yeah, it's 1,000. Yeah. Look at this one. Wow,
Yeah,
it cost
it's
almost
like-
$1,000.
Yeah.
And the idea of, and to me, it was like, why? Why would a government ban if people are willing to pay 125? Why will I pay $500?
Well, and that's fundamentally what we talk about. Whereas, who is the beneficiary
Yeah.
of policy? Is it the American people? Because if it was, if the deal is that most people would rather buy a Chinese EV for
Yeah.
a fraction of the
The
price,
cost.
then that is the free market choosing. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why when we talk about the United States is not actually capitalism, because people ask that every so often, like, what is capitalist versus, communist or whatever. The United States doesn't have a capitalist system, not really. And that is because the free market would have chosen the cheap Chinese EVs because they look great. And, if you say,
and there is a good quality.
good quality.
I read some reports about, I usually don't say things just for the top of my head, but I read somewhere about why the not only beside the price, the quality of the vehicles. And this is why Qatar went ahead and made that decision. Opening the entire market for the Chinese.
Well, and quite frankly, that's what the U.S. should have done too. However, the U.S. understands the position that we are in. The position that we are in is fundamentally China has caught up in pretty
Almost
much every way, right? So it is the world's leading manufacturer. They're a serious competitor in most advanced technologies, including AI. And it is the only power that could displace the United States. The United States is actually very interesting. Russia, I have like a whole opinion on that.
Yeah.
But Russia could not displace the United States. Do you know what I mean?
Because the size of its economy is not similar
exactly.
To
the EU could not displace the US. There is no economy other than China that could displace the United States. It's just China. And so if you're looking at it as a simple, and Donald Trump, his big thing is America first, right?
It's just a slogan.
It is because it's really American.
I mean, really,
corporate interest first.
Yeah, but are you really gonna tell me that he's advocating for America first? It's nonsense.
This is my personal opinion on it. My personal opinion on pretty much every politician I have seen in the past, I don't know how long.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. That they are whoever pays them first. They are corporate interest first.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is a businessman. Okay. It was one of the things that people, and a showman, but he's a businessman. And that's one of the things that people really liked about him. But the thing about business people is, what do? They favor businesses. And right now we have a handful of large corporations here in the United States that are controlling just about everything.
Yeah.
We have a handful of corporations that control all the media we consume, a handful that control all the technology, a handful that control all of our food. It's a handful of these large corporations, these mega corporations, with the illusion of choice because they have sub corporations, sub companies that have different names. So, in the grocery store is actually only a handful of people who make that food, but it looks like it's different because it's different brands, right?
Yeah.
And so, any politician going in is going to look after the corporate interests that are paying them. And that's, it's kind of the biggest insult these days is like, Joe Biden was bought off by China. Donald Trump was bought off by China. XYZ was bought off by China. It's this really big insult because the United States has not put its people first. If the United States had actually focused on building up infrastructure, if the US had focused years ago on bringing manufacturing back, because right now it's really challenging to bring manufacturing back. We don't have the labor, we don't have the brain power for that.
Sure.
And so if we had focused on that years ago, it would be less of a problem for the United States. But right now it is a genuine problem.
Yeah. And even for, just to add one more thing beside infrastructure, you mentioned about China, whatever, it's even in academia.
Oh yeah,
their universities,
absolutely.
their universities now are going up, competing with the top. Yes, you still have the Harvard, the Yales, and all that, but
Mhm.
For the cost, what they charge for that,
Yeah.
and let alone the nature of the whole education system, which is another conversation for another day. But the idea of, even from an educational aspect,
Mhm.
the Chinese universities are moving up the ranks
Yeah.
on a global level.
Yeah.
And this is why you're seeing that production of the engineers,
Mhm.
production of the science, math, and so forth, because there is a specific focus, and that
Yeah.
this focus doesn't happen overnight. That was based on a strategy, and the
Right.
strategy didn't happen last year.
Right.
That strategy was built on for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And you wonder why a country all of a sudden it sort of ascend to the top.
Yeah.
Well, because he worked for it. And this is one
Mhm.
one of the realities we are not willing to accept. We're not
Yeah.
going to accept it. We are not going to accept it. I'll tell you this right now.
No, and
We're not.
and fundamentally, what I think should happen is global cooperation, because global cooperation is
Well,
possible.
then
Okay.
you're entering into another sphere of what
Well-
we call the multipolar order. And the multipolar order that will be either defined by either cooperation,
Right.
which makes more sense,
Way more sense.
everybody wins,
Yeah.
or is going to be the creation of tensions to prevent an ascending power from replacing sitting
Right.
power.
And that's
which
what's
is exactly
happening
what we have. Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
However, we can choose cooperation. It turns
Which
out
makes more sense.
that's
It
very
makes more sense.
possible.
Yeah.
Um,
But however, I just don't see that from the US side, because I've
absolutely
already
not.
read into the policy that the candidate JD Vance already talking about regarding Taiwan. That gives me an idea already
Mhm.
where the next administration is going to go.
Absolutely.
This is the fear.
Yeah.
Not from the Chinese part. This is the fear that
Mhm.
Europeans have, especially with NATO, because candidate Trump is not a favor of NATO. Well, we
Yeah.
all know what NATO did,
Yeah.
end up messing up Europe in
Yeah.
a wrong direction. But that's another conversation for now. Just suffice it to highlight to you that sometimes the statements coming out of either the candidates or the ones that the presumptuous nominee,
Yeah.
in this case for Kamala Harris and so forth, where someone doesn't have an understanding of what international affairs are all about. It gives you an idea of what to expect, and this is the whole reason why we wanted to talk about this one here. There is another aspect we need to consider.
Yeah.
It has to do with the financial aspect,
which
is a big time. You know that BRICS is moving forward with the payment system.
Yeah.
And the key that I want to tackle here has to do with the Bitcoin.
Yes.
That the Russians now.
Yes. We actually have a whole show on.
Yeah, it's going to be with an expert.
Russian, yes.
An expert on this is someone I trust, someone who's a friend.
And we have a scripted show coming up about it too.
We're going to do one?
Yeah, we're shooting a scripted show about that, because Russia is in fact accepting Bitcoin.
Big change. Big change. You know, do you know that yesterday I just received a transaction on Bitcoin?
No way!
Yeah, somebody sent me something
exciting.
on Bitcoin. Yes,
that's exciting.
It was very.
I'm a big fan personally.
And it was secured. Everything went over, checked. They communicated with me as far as there is a transaction coming up your way. Here is the record to track it, and that's it.
Okay.
There is no ifs and buts. The government doesn't get involved into all this.
Thank you to whoever that was.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I will let you guys know about the Bitcoin later on.
That's cool.
So my point in all this, the Russians are thinking of it in terms within the context of BRICS. Well, because BRICS is creating now another option, another option to the dollar.
Right.
This is where that shift into multipolar that is already happening is going to be also mainly focused on the financial aspects.
Right. Well, and quite frankly, that makes sense. Like to have the entire world run on one system doesn't make much sense, right? To have the whole world basically running on the SWIFT system doesn't make sense fundamentally.
Well, we abused it too much.
And that is my biggest issue with U.S. Foreign policy in terms of economics is using sanctions as a weapon. I think was probably the most short-sighted thing that the US could have done. Did it work in the short term? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. It didn't work for Russia, and quite frankly, the US is still doing many millions of dollars of trade with Russia. It's just through either different channels, or the US just isn't talking about it, but it's still happening. But in the long term, fundamentally, weaponizing sanctions, I think, was probably one of the US's biggest mistakes, fundamentally.
Yeah, well, it's because there are sometimes the administration, doesn't matter who in Washington, will not want to disclose. That's why you don't see reports, or you don't hear much about in the mainstream media about really. I mean, did we hear much about these Bitcoin aspects here in the US?
No, but it is interesting because that happened sort of as Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, I've got a whole thing on Bitcoin because I believe in Bitcoin. What I will say, that's my personal opinion. It's not advice. It is my personal opinion. But what I will say is that now that Bitcoin, governments are buying Bitcoin, and large corporations have a lot of Bitcoin. JP Morgan Chase has a bunch of Bitcoin. Like, the bigs now have Bitcoin. So is it the same free market thing it was before? No, because they have enough Bitcoin that they can now influence the market. So, okay, so there's that.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, Donald Trump made a really big push, to make Bitcoin the superpower of the world. And so it's Democrats are very anti, especially like Elizabeth Warren or whatever. It's like very anti crypto. But what do they call her? Our modern day Pocahontas or something. But she cannot stop crypto.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump promised to make the USA the Bitcoin superpower of the world. And so that's very interesting that Bitcoin is now, that Russia came out about, hey, we're going to start using Bitcoin. So there's different ways that Bitcoin, I think, is now going to be used that the US dollar used to be used to do.
Well, especially in the case of Russia, because most of the energy transactions, if they can be accepted,
absolutely,
it's going to make more sense. It's because Russia has realized now that it doesn't make any more sense to send energy to Europe. It doesn't matter now. Now, we all know about what happened with Nord Stream 2 and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
Beside the point. And I argued this back then by saying, Russia doesn't have to worry about that. If they can allocate all their energy that goes to Europe, to Asia for that matter, just between, of course, China and India, which in the case of India, the issue is the payment in rupees. Of course, for the Indians, it's a smart move. Do you blame them for that? No. They're getting it cheap, selling it. And you know how they are paid for it? In dollars from Europe. The dollars and the euro. That's how they pay. It doesn't matter. But the point is, for the Russians, they'll make up that difference from sending their energy to Europe, sending it to now Asia markets. Why? Because that's where the future. That's where it's not the future. We're already there. And this is why you see in the movement, the strategic movement by certain countries in the region, the likes of Vietnam, the likes of Cambodia, which we are trying to woo away from China, because we want to use them as a rivalry. Because you all remember, and we talked about this before, when I went to Cambodia, I was nothing back then. When I went to Cambodia in 2009, I spent some time in Phnom Penh. One nice place, very, very nice. When people laid back and they just. But in 2014, we're trying to conduct. What do we call it? What do we call it?
Well,
it's like what's going on right now in Venezuela.
Yeah, whatever they conducted in Ukraine is a similar thing. To that.
And he failed. He failed. So now you see where the economy of Cambodia is. Now you see where the economy of Vietnam.
Yeah.
Remember, after G20?
Yeah.
Biden, where did he go first? Vietnam. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Because it's not that they, meaning Cambodia and Vietnam, are scared of China. No. It's because they are realizing you do not want to jeopardize the economic prosperity that we have achieved.
Right.
We, in this case, Cambodia and Vietnam, we have achieved with China.
Well,
that's to them common sense.
And they've come out of some really dark times.
Well, after our dark history, how can we forget?
I know.
We can't forget.
I don't think they forgot either.
Well, this is one of the reasons also why they're saying to the Americans, thanks, but no thanks. They're still going to maintain diplomatic relations.
Of course.
That's the norm. But they ain't going to forget what we have done. And the best example to look at it now is Philippines. Look where Philippines is. And we just had Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense together in Japan for an alliance. Anytime.
Blinken.
Anytime. Here's the thing. Anytime you see Blinken traveling with the Secretary of Defense, you get the idea.
Dude, anytime I hear Blinken, period.
Yeah, he just doesn't.
He's like, we're gonna get Ukraine into this NATO, and it's guaranteed, and it's for sure.
It's really, really not only pathetic, but it shows you the low level of diplomacy that we have reached. This is like the bottom of the bottom.
Yeah.
Because you have amateurs, you don't have individuals who can really even articulate what the diplomatic conversation ought to be, let alone the manner in which you conduct this kind of conversations.
Well,
I don't know if you remember the meeting in Alaska between China and the US the first time Biden came to power. In Alaska, way back.
Oh my God, way back.
Yeah, and we did a video on it.
Yeah.
And the arrogance by which we approached the talks. You are inviting a guest and you act like that.
Yeah.
That just
we have a very big drama problem here in the United States. I don't know why, but even if you look at our presidential elections right now, how full of drama is this?
Yeah. Well,
this is insanity, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you. The term, just for me, I will use a differerent term for that.
What is
that
that?
Expression of the failure.
Oh, for
this
sure.
Is a pure failure.
Unquestionably, yes.
Of course, the average Joe, average Jane doesn't understand those dynamics because, like I always say, they are worrying about, do I have something to eat for dinner?
Well, and that fundamentally is also a failure.
Well, it is big time.
For the richest country in the world to have anyone that doesn't have food to eat.
Yeah, and we do have that in the US.
Oh, absolutely. And it's growing and it's growing. And it's interesting because, inflation is not being tamed, right? Like we still have inflation and, all of this stuff is still going on. And now we have what feels like a reality show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It literally feels like a reality show. It doesn't feel like it's real. It feels like a reality show. And honestly, it's hard to know what to do. You look at the situation and, the people have been asking about whether Biden was fit to run the country again for pretty much the entirety of his first term.
Yeah. No, it was never.
And the Democrats at that point could have started building somebody else up to take that nomination. And they didn't.
Yeah.
And
no, the system is done for. It's always, it doesn't mean there are not solutions out there. There are solutions. It's just the establishment will not allow. I do have some solutions for that. For example, you're going to have to revamp the entire structure of the election system. You're going to have to revamp the entire structure of the budget for the US government. You have to restructure the entire setting of why do we have 856 bases around the world? Cut them down. You need to cut down. Do you guys know that it takes $1 million a month for electricity to pay those bases?
Yeah.
Why? So you start with to me, those are the basics.
Yeah.
It's like you are home. You have a budget. What are you going to be living beyond your means? No.
Well, and even if so there is an argument for debt being very productive because when the United States it depends on what it's for. So when the United States began taking on debt, right? Collecting debt, the debt was used to grow the country. It was used to build infrastructure. It was used in very productive ways. Now that isn't the case. Now we're taking on debt to service debt. Now and especially the servicing of debt, because I've heard people say this, and this is very odd logic to me, but I've heard commentators, or they're not, but you know what I mean, the talking head people say, well, you know what, the US can absolutely handle their own debt, right? The US can absolutely handle the debt. We're definitely bringing in more we're bringing more in taxes than we have in servicing this debt. What they don't talk about is that the amount of money that goes towards servicing debt can no longer go back towards the people, can no longer go back towards infrastructure. It can no longer go back towards investments that then produce results, right?
Mhm.
That produce. And so we have a fundamental issue with that debt. And it's a really big problem. It's a really big problem.
Well, this one falls under what's they call the MMT,
Mhm.
the modern monetary theory, which
Yeah.
it's not my area. I do not know much, but the guest we're gonna have next time, not this time, but later on,
The
is,
one we're interviewing on
yeah,
Friday
yeah,
morning?
Dr. Yan.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
Dr. Yang. She, the MMT. It's her
Yeah,
background.
yeah. Oh,
She's an
great. Great,
economist.
great. Yeah.
She's an economist. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
intend to reach out to her and ask her for this
Oh,
channel.
also questions, guys. If you want us to answer questions, put them in there.
Yeah, prepare your questions for that.
Mhm.
So just to let me see where we are at here. Yeah, just to sort of highlight the big picture of all this one is to understand what kind of policies the
Mhm.
next president here in the US is going to embark on,
Mhm.
and whether this policy is going to be of benefit to the American people.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I'll say it right now. I don't
Mhm.
care what comes out of Washington.
Yeah.
As one who works inside,
Yeah.
you know how things work. And once you know how the machine works, you will you know what to expect.
Yeah.
There is nothing that's going to be of service or
Yeah.
of benefit to the American people.
Oh, for sure.
Where the problem, and to go back to the issue of debt while I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it, Jerome Powell,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, I know it's
Yeah,
another guy,
yeah.
but it's not about that. It's about what he said.
Mhm.
It is too late to repay
Yeah.
our national debt.
I agree.
And you know what it means?
Mhm.
If we default,
Yeah.
the crumbling of the entire United States,
Yeah.
we'll start seeing it, because
thing
you're talking about the salaries of the military,
Yeah.
police force, medics, the
Mhm.
AMSs, retirement pension, you name it.
Mhm.
The whole system will collapse from within.
Well, and it's not even just the United States.
Yeah.
So many other countries have tied their currencies to the US dollar also.
They're gonna pay
So
the
it
price, yeah.
causes the failure of the US dollar is not a good thing in terms of short-term globals. In terms of situation short term
Yeah.
for many, many countries. And I do see there's a lot of talk about central bank digital currencies right now.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's a digital euro, right, that's in development. The digital euro is really, really funny. I read an article that they were talking about, because people don't trust central bank digital currencies.
I know.
And they don't trust it because that gives the government so much power. Yeah, absolute control. That's really the way to say it.
Yeah.
It gives the government absolute control. And I don't think anyone trusts at this point that large corporations or governments will not sell your information.
Yeah.
They will. They're going to sell your information, right?
They're already doing it here now.
I think
with the phone.
I think was it Instagram that sold all of their messages to Netflix. Like all of our messages, I think it was Instagram. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was Instagram that sold all of our messages to Netflix so that Netflix could mine those messages for information and serve us up content. Right? Like that's something no one's talking about. Why? They should be. That's insanity.
Yeah.
And so I think whoever runs the monetary system has the control. So people are very, very skeptical of central bank digital currencies right now, even though all the big governments are trying it. All the big governments have central bank digital currencies in development. So it was really funny because the article is talking about how the powers that be were like, no, guys, this is so safe. This is going to be super protected. It's going to be really safe. No one's going to take advantage of you with the digital euro, guys. Yeah. I was like,
are you going to trust you?
Nobody believes that.
No way. No way.
No one buys that.
All right, guys, let's take some questions from you here before we sign off here, and we'll just go from there. So just a reminder, we will be recording the interview with the financial expert tonight, but we will release it later on.
Mm-hmm.
And also there is another individual. I like to keep the anonymous till due time, and you will know. We're also going to be recording another one on Friday, but we will release it also the next week or the following week, whatever that is. So, all right, let's see some questions from you. And as always, by the way, guys, greatly appreciate your kind support. So
Oh, Francis Tango, I see your question, or I see what you said. His name is Caesar, like the dog whisperer guy. Yeah,
I don't know what
Caesar,
that
I
is.
think, right?
I don't know.
Anyway, but thank you. I will definitely check him out. Caesar Milan, right? Is that right? Caesar
No.
Milan.
Okay. All I know
Okay.
is Julius Caesar.
No,
This
this is the dog whisperer guy. The dog whisperer guy. Okay. Yes. I can't.
Let me. I see one here.
Okay.
Timeline Dunkley from New York. Good to see you as always. Will the Philippines people rise up and take their country back, or will they make that Philippines president kill off the people by getting in a war with China and make the country be destroyed? Very interesting question. First of all, it will be no war between Philippines and China.
Yeah, who would win that one?
Yeah.
Real quick.
It just won't. Because here is the thing. And again, there are those in the West that they consider China being nice. They misinterpret that for weakness. That's so the Chinese understand the overwhelming power they have. They will flatten Philippines, but are they going to do that? No, they won't. China doesn't behave that way, and this is why I am already thinking ahead of time about where finally that time is clear to the rest of the world when China sits at the top of the world, what they're going to be doing, what they're going to do, what kind of leadership they're going to be providing for the rest of the world. And this is something, mark my word on it, there is already a conversation inside Beijing about that time, because that's how the Chinese think. They think far ahead. So the idea of Philippines turning into a war with China, it won't happen.
Yeah.
What is going to happen is if we are pushing or keep going with what we are doing right now, we will turn Philippines into another Ukraine. And that becomes the question. Yeah. And I hope it doesn't. But this is when it becomes now the power of the people in Philippines, because Philippines will have to demand, and again, it's their call, will have to demand for Marcos to step down. No ifs and buts. Of course, the big concern in Philippines right now is you still have about 6 more years with Marcos.
Yeah.
Because the term is
that's a long time.
That's a long time.
That's a
so
long,
it becomes
long
the question is, do the people can do it peacefully? This is the keyword. Peacefully request that Marcos Jr. step down.
Yeah. Well, and put somebody in place
someone who
that has a
the only problem in Philippines, a lot of people do not understand the structure of its governments, is who runs. Is Marcos is just another figurehead. The military has a strong hold into the establishments, how it works. The US has a strong hold on Marcos in this case. Because of the family assets, which we all know. We are not going to beat the dead horse over this one here. Because the way you understand this is when you compare the presidency of Marcos to that of Duterte. We couldn't exert the same influence on Duterte.
Right.
It was an interview, I remember, because I listened to it, of Duterte back then. And when he stated, and paraphrase here, that the US was trying to push him into more tensions with China. And he argued, are you guys crazy? Wants me to fight China? This is a genocide. I'll die.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
someone else commented by saying, wouldn't it be better that if the 3-letter agency takes you out? That
oh no, absolutely.
That gives you an idea right there. But at the same time, when Duterte was in power, yes, he did embark on some policies that you and I might disagree with. But again, he wanted to clean up his own country. Maybe the way he went about it was, but again, it's a reflection of where things are. Marcos, on the other hand, is sacrificing the welfare of his people. This is where the problem is. When you have a leader that starts to sacrifice the welfare of for his or her people, it's no good leader. But for a war with China, I don't see that happening. It won't happen.
Oh, I mean, they would. I mean, instantly. Okay, so.
And by the way, if I may add,
we
are not coming to the defense of Philippines. We say we will, but we won't. U.S. will never come to the defense of anybody.
Well, I mean,
we can't fight ourselves. I mean, it's sad. As a former military myself, it's sad. Look what happened in Afghanistan. Look what happened.
Oh, absolutely,
in
absolutely.
in Iraq and Yemen and some other parts of the world. We couldn't. That was the argument I made back in 2002.
Yeah.
My first flight when I got to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I had a chance inside the where we were in headquarters there and talking. And it's like, you guys, this war is not winnable. Do you know that, right? Well, Mr. O, we cannot have to. I was like, you don't understand what you're getting into here. If you think you have your F-18s and you have your bombs and you're going to scare those people, you're mistaken.
Well, and they didn't even, so it's actually very interesting when you look at winning, right? Because right now we're looking at that with the Ukraine. We're looking at what does winning actually look like, be, right? So they're like, well, we want our territory back and we want this and we want this.
Ain't going to happen.
We're never going to,
ain't going to happen. I'm here to tell you, did you know that the end of the Ukraine, on whose terms going to be? On the Russians. On the Russians' term. Ain't gonna be on the US term or Ukraine or the EU or NATO or what have you. It's gonna be on Russia's term. My word on it.
And historically, if you look at history, how many times has that part of the world been cut up? Over and over and over and over again. This is actually all across the world. Part of and I think people who don't understand this fundamentally are very poor readers of history.
That's true.
We think that, and it's even crazy to look at, Czechia. Do you remember when the Czech Republic was Czechoslovakia?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, Czech, Slovakia, they're two different places. Yeah, Montenegro, how recent has Montenegro became a country, I think in 2004, something like that?
Yeah.
So it's actually, and I know I'm going to get some comments like, how can you say that? It's very normal. I don't think it's right. Okay. So I'm going to say that I don't think it's right. But if you look at historically how these things have happened, countries get cut up all the time. And like I said, I don't think it's right. I don't personally think war is right. But that isn't unheard of. And the way the US is talking about it is like it's an unheard of thing that's never happened ever in the history of ever. That's not true. It just isn't. And so I think Ukraine is a very cautionary tale for many of these smaller countries that could be used as potential pawns in a much larger game.
Yeah. Well, let's hope Philippines can learn something.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. There are many questions. Okay. Here, let me do like a really quick one. Francis Tango. Can the third party in the US can participate in November? Okay. So can they? Yeah, technically. But there has been a very large, what I believe personally is a psyop that says if you vote third party, it's a wasted vote. Okay. And I personally believe it's a psyop because the amount of people that have wanted to vote for a third party, probably over time may have actually been enough for there to have been a third party candidate. However, everyone believes and everyone keeps spouting that, oh no, it's a wasted vote. So can they? Technically, yes. Are they going to? Because RFK would be that. Yeah. RFK would be that third party candidate. Is that what's happening? No, I don't think that's going to happen.
All right, let's take this one from Juan Horn. Good to see you. Dr. O, what are your thoughts on what's happening in Venezuela? Very interesting. You know what's going on in Venezuela, right? Yeah. And by the way, and I use the term thugs. Oh, she's waking up. She's dreaming. Those guys been paid $140 a day, which is a lot of money in Venezuela. So you got the idea who's been paying for that. So it's shame on them that will carry something like that, especially because the first thing you target, you know what it is? Hospitals. The same thing Israel is doing. Targeting hospitals.
Dude, what Israel is doing,
well, Israel dug a hole for itself. It's too late now.
A horrible hole. Horrible hole.
Yeah, it's gonna be attacked from
keep
4 directions. before.
I know,
not
and
one.
they keep digging. They keep digging. They keep
Yeah, dude,
digging.
it's too late.
I
for
don't
them,
know.
so.
And it's still very unpopular here in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
know.
yeah, for
I don't know.
Venezuela, it's the idea is of I just saw yesterday a picture of what's her name, the female lady. I forgot her name. It was a picture of her with George W. Bush in the White
Mhm.
House. She's been groomed for that for a long time. She's the opposition, whatever. The thing is, what just happened last night is that the military in Venezuela declared its support for Maduro.
Mhm.
For Maduro, in other words, they stand in
Yeah.
on the side of Maduro to ensure safety of the country. But to go and attack hospitals and all that, it's
Yeah.
pathetic. But we all know revolutions how we do them. So,
Okay, do you want to take the Bitcoin question or the UK bankruptcy question?
either or.
Okay,
Whatever.
let's briefly touch on both. How about let's do Bitcoin first. Rabia Barak, what are your thoughts about digital currency or Bitcoin? Can it replace
No.
dollars?
I am not qualified. I am not qualified to be talking about this. All I can tell you, based at least where I see the trends, it just replacing the dollar. It's not going to happen quickly. The dollar still maintaining its stronghold because we've been doing this since World War II when we established Bretton Woods. Where the challenge that I'm going to be seeing with this is once countries start to reduce the reserves of the dollar, what that's going to do to us.
Absolutely.
To us, it's going to hit home very hard. Americans
Absolutely.
do not understand this reality. As to the Bitcoin replacing it, I can't answer this one. I'm not.
So Bitcoin is being used as a store of value right
Value,
now.
yeah.
So originally Bitcoin was supposed to be a currency. It's like it's called a cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And there are like a handful of places in the world where it's used, right?
Yeah.
So like Bitcoin jungle in Costa Rica and you know some place.
I think
El Salvador. El
I'm
Salvador
sorry.
is the other place.
Yeah.
But these are like tiny communities that are using it as currency. And even when Trump talks about it, because I think a lot of this conversation about Bitcoin, so central bank digital currencies and cryptocurrencies are different, very different. But so Bitcoin is very different than other cryptocurrencies. Okay. I do not fundamentally believe in other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin has enough staying power. My personal opinion is that Bitcoin has a lot of staying power. But people are using Bitcoin not as currency, but they're using it as store of value, like gold, for example. And so that's an interesting that perhaps isn't the way that it was designed. I don't know who designed it. I don't think it was one guy. My opinion is that it was like a group of people who put Bitcoin together. But my understanding is that what it's being used for in the future is as a store of value, because that is what's happening right now. The people and it makes sense because the people who got into Bitcoin earlier, and as people have gotten into Bitcoin has grown in value exponentially, even in the last couple of years, even in the last year. Bitcoin recently hit a high of, I think it was 75,000 US dollars per Bitcoin, something around 75,000. And so it was very interesting to sort of watch something that was perhaps designed to be a currency be a store of value, because I also don't see gold being used as a currency, right? Like we're not going to go back to using gold coins.
No.
And so governments are, and the US government in particular is trying to figure out, but governments of the world, like I just talked about the digital euro, they're trying to figure out how to get out of the mess that they've gotten into, because every fiat currency has failed throughout all of history, right? How many fiat currencies do we have? The thing that we have that's had staying power, for example, is gold. Gold's had massive staying power throughout hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so I don't think that Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, my personal opinion is that they're not going to replace it. But what I do think is that Bitcoin specifically is being used as an interesting store of value, similar to gold. And I'm curious to see what type of central bank digital currencies are, because they're really pushing on them, right? Every major economy is pushing on a central bank digital currency. So Are they eventually going to win that battle? I don't know, but all of them are testing it. So that's my short version
Let's
of
do
that.
this last question here because this is very interesting. What?
Okay.
You got there?
No.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to do the UK bankruptcy one too.
We'll do that.
Okay,
too.
okay.
Yeah. What do you think about the situation of Palestine after Ismail Haniyeh assassination? Yeah, it was stupid. It was stupid on part of the Israelis to do that. The reason being because it doesn't have any strategic value to assassinate the head of the political office. You know, Ismail Haniyeh has been around for a long time and all that stuff, but killing him, it has no strategic value whatsoever. So they're gonna replace him immediately anyway. But you can look at it from the aspect of really because targeting him on a foreign soil, which makes it even more worse for Israel in that case. When he was in Tehran, that is. The assassination itself, like, what does it serve if it doesn't have no strategic? It has one objective and one objective only, is like a bait to pull Iran into the conflict. What the problem that Israelis do not consider is that now they're going to be attacked from 4 angles: from Lebanon, from Yemen, from Iraq, and from Iran. 4. And so far, the drone that the H group in Yemen has launched, demonstrated the failure of Israel's air defense system. So Iran has an advanced one. What you can think of, and who knows, I might talk about this next week. What you can think of is the statements of the Russians, what they said. And they just said it this morning. Basically, what it's stating is you will need a war in the region to set peace on a right footing.
Oh, no, I know.
So you know what it means.
Yeah.
If you read between the lines, that means the Russians, most likely, they are going ahead with arming the H group in Yemen and providing now Iran with some other type of systems, which the systems, by the way, is going to end up with the H group in Lebanon. If Israel fears any group of all beside Iran, is the H group in Lebanon. So that's the way I see it. But killing Ismail Haniyeh, it was stupid. It was stupid to assassinate.
No, and honestly, we kind of have stayed a little bit away from that topic because of the censorship that happens.
Yes, a lot.
YouTube.
That's why I didn't talk much about it.
But overall,
we might do it on Rumble.
Yeah, maybe. I think that might be a good idea.
But even in Rumble, I just came across something that was removed. A comment.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Somebody sent me a comment. I said, Dr. O, my comment is removed.
Oh no.
And I didn't want to jump to conclusions.
No.
I didn't want to jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
I'm not jumping to conclusions yet. It just sort of raised the flag for me. It's like, why will a Rumble do that?
I don't know.
To begin with.
I don't know.
So I don't want to jump to it till I dig further into all this.
Because it's actually very hard to find a politician right now that is objective about that situation. So including the ones that are currently running for president.
All right, let's do last question.
Okay. I lost it, but it basically
it's
was
about
like
I read the question.
Yeah,
it's about the why will the government? It's from Hong Wang.
Yeah. I think so. I think
my
that's
memory
right.
is still working. So, thanks to the vitamins, right?
Yeah.
Why the British government will announce that the country is bankrupt?
Yeah.
No. Well, it's because they can't lie about it, because when you see the prices or where things are, it's also because of what the finance minister disclosed about the previous prime minister, the incompetent and idiot Sunak, end up spending 28 billion pound more than what they, in other words, where that 28 billion dollar came from. So that's the only way I see the British government wanted to clear its name per se, saying we are doing, but the previous administration, and that's the only other way. There is also now, I heard the demonstrations that's going on in England.
Well, there should be.
Yeah,
everyone should be demonstrating
because it's getting very bad in England.
Yeah,
it's getting very bad. So.
Well, the thing is, how many PMs have they had in the last
like 4 or 5.
Like 5? I think it's like 5 now.
Such
because
a short period.
you got it. I think the British people really should be asking themselves, what are the criteria by which these people are being nominated and coming into power? Because there is something fundamentally wrong. There's something fundamentally wrong with our system too.
Oh, ours is bad.
And I think most Americans right now are actually asking themselves or asking ourselves, how exactly did we get to this point? And I do think the question was like, why aren't people freaking out more? And that's a great question. I actually have that question here too. Why are people not more introspective of like, how did we get to this point and how can we get ourselves out? Because I do, there's people yelling and screaming, but that's not the same as working your way out of a hole. And right now we're watching people do that across the board. And I think the answer is that people are distracted. People are super distracted. And if you look at what just happened, the Paris Olympics, everybody's all up in arms about this like one act, right? That was
well, it was despicable. It was despicable. I am not a Christian. I don't do religion, but it was despicable. You don't show them respect for other values or whatever. So who gives them the right to do something like that one just because it's in their country?
Well,
it's not
here's
right.
the thing.
It's
like
not right.
In the grand scheme of things,
is
it more important
then I see your
Britain
point.
Is bankrupt, that the UK is bankrupt.
You got a point there. Or is it more
important?
Yeah, or even for France itself, where the economy is going so bad.
Right.
No, you got a point there.
What's more important here?
I see. You got a point. It just was the idea. I mean, when I saw it first, and I usually don't get involved in a conversation or stuff like that, because to me it was already like a lost cause. But it was disrespect. You don't.
Sure. But there's disrespect happening all over the world. And the biggest disrespect is politicians bankrupting a country.
Yeah, that is true.
There is no bigger disrespect than throwing your people into poverty.
Yeah. And
right.
That's what we're doing here too.
It is. There is no bigger disrespect than that. And I think that any other thing, because we have all these social issues that we're all mad about, there is no bigger disrespect than making your people poor and miserable and sick. There is no bigger disrespect than that. And no one is screaming about that. Everyone is screaming about more or less these shallow things.
Yeah.
And are they important? Yes, they are important. But are they as important as throwing a large percent of your population into abject poverty and misery? No, they aren't. And so I think we have wrong priorities in every single sector right now, wrong priorities, and the illusion that we're helpless to do anything about it. Because fundamentally, I think the reason that Brits and Americans aren't doing more is because we believe we can't. We don't know that there's anything else possible. And so we just sit there and we say, you know what? I can't really do anything anyway. Even if I protest, it's not a big, even if I do this, it's not a big deal. No.
Yeah.
We are the ones who get to dictate that, not them. That's true. I think it's a fundamental, like we demoralized people to the extent that they don't want to stand up anymore. Yeah. And that cannot be the way that we handle this.
Last question.
Okay.
What happened to my finger?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I torn a ligament. So the top of my finger, we have a tiny ligament here or tendon. If that one is torn, you won't be able to bend your finger, the top of it. I can move this part, but even as tiny as this one, it helps you grip the stuff, whatever. So that's what happened. And you have to keep this straight for 6 weeks. That is the issue with it.
How did you do it though?
I got stuck in a ladder. So I put my hand in and went backward, and it is what it is. So Army with Harmony saying thank you to you.
Oh,
thank you to her. And he said earlier to say thank you to Dr. Stewart. We will let him know.
Yes,
we will.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Dr. Stewart, I will have him come over on the Health Channel towards the end of the month, next month, and we'll talk about. Some of you guys been asking about the vitamins, so. Because Dr. Stewart is his background also besides psychology is chemistry. He understands the brain very well and the chemistry and all that stuff. So I'll talk with him and we'll see. All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed this this live stream here. As we said earlier, we will be recording for the next 2 or 3 days with some guests, and we'll release those for you. Also, be on the lookout for the video, the scripted. We're gonna be releasing about the gold, I believe, right?
So we got a couple of scripteds
Couple of
coming
them,
out, and you guys will just have to be surprised.
Yeah,
all of it is
leave it at that.
economics related
Yeah.
because like we said, the reason we're sort of shifting the direction of the channel
Yeah,
is
yeah.
because everything is economics at
That's
its
true.
foundation. Everything is money and power based,
That's true.
and everything else is an illusion.
Yeah.
So
that's what we're gonna do. Remember to join me on Saturday at 12:30 for my conversation with Dr. Dashan Fang and Dr. Yang. So look forward to seeing you. As always, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time. Bye-bye.